All right, so we're going to talk about exercise and the prevention of physical health declines. Right, we talked about a lot of things about physical health and the body and how that changes with age, but we will see that exercise is quite important. So there's lots and lots of research about how being sedentary, not exercising, increases our risk for a whole host of age-related diseases. It's associated with lower cardiovascular health, where you might get heart attacks or high blood pressure, hypertension, which is high blood pressure. It increases your risk for cancer, obesity, osteoporosis, and even type 2 diabetes. Right, and this is particularly concerning, especially for a lot of us who live in Southern California, right? We spend a lot of time driving and in traffic, so it can be really challenging to make sure we have physically active lifestyles. But you'll see that exercise is very important. So a relatively recent study looked at leukocyte telomere length, and people who are studying aging are now really interested in this aspect of our DNA. So telomere length, a telomere, if you look at this picture here, it's the little yellow parts of our chromosomes. That's the red part here. And they are like caps to our chromosomes. They protect our chromosomes and our DNA from degrading, and it also prevents end-to-end fusion in bad recombinations. So you don't want your one chromosome to combine with another in some weird kind of combination. And telomere length is now considered a biological indicator of aging. So each time our cells divide, right, our cells constantly are dividing and renewing. Each time that happens, our telomere length becomes shorter. And our length of the telomere reflects how much cumulative oxidative stress we have. So just breathing in oxygen and just breathing in air is part of the reason why we age. It's still kind of mysterious, but people know that there's this oxidative stress from just even breathing, right? We need oxygen, but it also causes us to age. And it also, the telomere length also reflects the amount of inflammation we have in our lifetimes. So it's a really interesting biological indicator. The studies have shown that telomere length has been associated with smoking. So if you smoke, you tend to have shorter telomere length. Remember what else is associated with smoking? Poor sense of smell and aging the skin. So smoking is just bad in general. And telomere length is also associated with high BMI or body mass index. So if you're overweight or have too much fat for how tall you are, that's associated with shorter life, a shorter telomere length. And it's also associated with lower socioeconomic status. So people who have lower incomes, less education, less advanced jobs, they tend to have telomere lengths that are shorter as well, right? And that reflects lectures we've had on status and health much earlier in the course. So in general, if you look at our age, telomere length tends to be quite long when we're very young, and it decreases sharply as we get older. So one really interesting study looked at twins and pairs of twins. They actually looked at 1,200 pairs total, and they asked these twins how much physical activity they do for leisure. They excluded physical activity done for work. So if you worked in construction or something and during physical activity, they don't count that in this study. And what they found was what they call a dose-response effect. So just ignore the dark gray versus the light gray bars and just kind of average them together. You can see that with more physical activity, right on the left is inactive, then a light amount, moderate, and heavy amounts of physical activity. The more activity we do, the longer our telomere length. So there's a dose-response effect because the more exercise we do, the longer our telomere length. And it's a positive linear trend, right? So it's not saying you have to do heavy versus being totally inactive, but even doing a little bit more physical activity is associated with a longer telomere length. Right, so you see a positive correlation between telomere length and physical activity. The really interesting part here was even looking at twins who were discordant. So actually, most twins were concordant, meaning that if one twin was very physically active, the other twin was also very physically active, and vice versa. If one twin was sedentary, the other twin tended to be sedentary also. So there was only a few discordant twins where one twin exercised much more than the other twin. But even these twins with the same, DNA, and these twins were actually raised together, the twin who was more active tended to have longer telomere length than the twin that was less active, and actually about 88 nucleotides longer, which is quite a big difference. 88 nucleotides longer is about 5 years younger. All right, so basically they found that more physical activity for leisure was correlated with longer telomere length. If you compared the most active people versus the least active, so very heavy physical activity versus no activity at all, their telomere length was actually 200 nucleotides longer, which actually translate to being 10 years younger on average, like biologically looking like they're 10 years younger on average. So that's a huge, very substantial, qualitatively important difference, right? Having that heavy amount of physical activity, made them biologically seem about 10 years younger than those who were totally sedentary. They're still not sure quite how the process works. How does exercise actually translate into longer telomere length? But in general, this shows that exercise is really important. And currently, the US recommends 30 minutes of moderate intensity exercise 5 days a week. So quite a bit of exercise. And it seems like the more you do, the longer your telomere length in general.